ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا.
Dear Malcolm, in PS 201, a school nestled in Flushing, Queens, where 43% of the students are black, the children were banned from writing about you. The teacher dragged her chalk, scratching a line through your name as a way to mute you. She told the children to pour their whiteouts, hit their backspace keys, and clench their teeth to prevent your name from spilling through their mouths, as though it was a profanity. When the children shifted in their seats and a quivering hand stretched out like a lone branch, demanding why, the teacher said because you were violent. But it's okay if the children still learn about Columbus, who explored land while stomping on corpses and while, I quote, dashing out brains of Indians and feeding them to armored attack dogs, end quote. It's okay if our children learn about President Washington, who owned more than 300 slaves, whipping their bodies bloody and selling them to buyers in West Indies to sever ties from their lovers as a cruel punishment. This is okay. But God forbid they learn about you, Malcolm. God forbid they learn about someone who tells them to adore their dark skin, tells them about their lineage that runs through the richest of civilizations, who tells them their blood is not cheap but worth every ounce of self-defense.
The streets breathe Malcolm. The hearts beat Malcolm. The city hall needs Malcolm. Malcolm, what would you do now? What would you say to the mother of Michael Brown? What would you say when Trayvon hit the ground? What would you say when kids were killed because they followed Islam? Malcolm, your alma mater was books. Malcolm, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read.
Remember the martyr, remember the minister, remember the father, remember the soldier, remember the scholar, remember the Muslim. That man that you honor, he was more than the color of his skin and the texture of his hair. He was more than that history that stripped us bare. He was more than that nationalist with his black fist in the air. He was honest, he was just, he was fair, a breath of fresh air, an undying flame in a moment of despair. And 50 years later, we're still waiting for the smoke to clear. Dear Malcolm, they pulled back triggers to take away your light, but half a century later, you still shine bright.
As long as people continue to suffer psychologically, economically, and socially under the confines of an oppressive society, there will always emerge strong, vigilant, vigorous champions who resist the tyrants and work to inculcate within the oppressed a sense of pride and dignity, and to correct the distortion of tyrannical rulership that masquerade as truth. I am Mohammed bin Shamjad. I am the son of Haji Shamjad. I was born in North Carolina, Jim Crow society, segregation, all the above. And I'm somewhat connected to his experience. And as history unfolds, you will see how my family got involved. When we think about Alhaji Malik Shabazz or Malcolm X, I prefer the Hajj Malik Shabazz because that's the end result of his journey. We think about a guy standing at the window, an AK-47, and the statement, by any means necessary. Or a person who was a criminal and then he ended up in the latter part of his life as a saint. But one thing unique about Malcolm X is that he belongs to everybody, to everyone. He belongs to the civil rights movement, he belongs to the human rights, the militancy that existed in the 50s, the Panthers, the Afrocentric revolution and identity search, just social justice. He belonged to everyone. And he was a leader, he was a scholar, he was a teacher, he was a father, he was a husband, he was a brother, he was all the above. But somewhere along the line, we lose the humanity of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. Who was this person? What evolved, or what caused him to evolve until the final stages of his life? You see, when we look at an accomplishment as such, it's phenomenal. Because he was not a person of education, he was not a person of college. He started from the bottom. His life started from the bottom. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska, to Louise Helen, who actually was from the Caribbean. And his father was Earl Little. Anyone here ever visit Omaha, Nebraska? Just raise your hand. Okay. When you look at the skyline, you don't think about the dark undercurrents of negativity that existed in that society. In 1919, there was a public burning in Omaha, Nebraska. A gentleman by the name of Willie Brown, who was accused of raping a white girl or white lady. He was jailed, the mob, they took him from the jail, they had a public lynching, and they burned him on the stake. This is the mind state that existed in Omaha, Nebraska during the time of the birth of Malcolm X. And remind you, this is the experience of the early years of Malcolm X. So you have to understand how he began, so you understand his mind state. So this was the early stages. In Lansing, Michigan, another group called the Black Legions, which was another pseudo-Klans group, burned their house. I think he was about 5 years old at that time. And the following year, he was killed. His father, Malcolm's father, Earl Little, was killed by a trolley car. They said it was an accident. One insurance company refused to pay out the life policy because they said he committed suicide. And the lesser claim paid out $1,000 at $83 a month. So they was very, very impoverished from the loss of their father. And as time unfolded, in 1939, his mother was committed to a state mental institution. Okay? In 1939, shortly a few years after the death of his father. Because she refused to allow her children to be indoctrinated by the system at that time. And not being in compliance with the system that was established, you were deemed insane. So she was committed to a mental institution. And she was also raped. And she had the baby. So this is the type of trauma that Malcolm was going through in his early years. And when she went into the mental institution, he ended up in a juvenile foster home. So when he became 13, he was in class and he was questioned as to what was his aspirations or his dreams in the future. He said, he wanted to be a lawyer. And his teacher said that wasn't a typical career for a Negro. Coming out of the country, he wanted to go to New York. And eventually he went to New York, and as a young man, he got the jobs as working in the nightclubs and restaurants and things of this nature. And eventually got in trouble. Like usually young people don't have that oversight, that guidance, things of this nature. He got in trouble. So he was sentenced to 3 months, suspended for 1 year parole. So he returned back to Boston, and he finished his parole. And I'm sure that he had some unfinished business in New York, so he did return. But this time it wasn't so pleasant. He was convicted of burglary, larceny, and all the above, and also possession of a weapon, which was actually the knife he used to pick the door, but it was charged with a weapon. And he was sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison. And this was the turning point of Malcolm X. When he got into the prison, he was very angry, but he came across, a group of people that were there from the Nation of Islam. A very organized, disciplined body of people, who was against all the things that was for the demise of human dignity, whether it was physically, mentally, etc. And over a period of years, he began to give ear to their doctrine, to their teachings, and eventually he embraced. You see, Malcolm wasn't your ordinary person. He began to study, he began to educate himself, was to continue to eradicate social injustice. And he made the sacred journey to Mecca. In 1964, he made the pilgrimage. He entered into a dimension, a world that he never knew about. A world that had been kept a secret from him. Doors closed. And you can read his letters of his confession to true Islam. He was amazed to see Europeans and Africans and Asians sitting and sharing the same dish of food, drinking from the same vessel with no sense of discrimination. This was unheard of in this society at that time. I can remember not even being permitted to go inside of a restaurant that was owned by Anglo-Americans. I can recall going to the theater where we had to go upstairs in a segregated compartment of the theater to watch the movies. Schools were segregated, everything. And what he experienced there was something that was unheard of in this society. It was an experience that changed his whole perception of mankind. At that point, he became a moral physician and a humanitarian. And he understood the plight wasn't, and the struggle was not just isolated to the people in America. And he began to travel. He went to Egypt and places like that. And when he came back Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. This is when he changed his name. And something unique happened when he was in Saudi Arabia for the Hajj. He sat, I don't know if you've seen this picture, it's a historic picture of him sitting with King Faisal. But at that time, it was Prince Faisal in 1964. And slavery, that's the same year that slavery was abolished in Saudi Arabia. Slavery was legal in Saudi Arabia. It wasn't chattel slavery as the Western slavery, but it was a form of slavery that was abolished in 1964 by Prince Faisal. And this is some of the dialogue that Prince Faisal and Malcolm X had concerning the equality of his citizens. But him leaving the Nation of Islam created a rift